Hey YouTube, I'm back with another tutorial, but this time I'll be showing you guys how I make my lace closure middle part wigs. So if this is something that you're interested in, keep watching. So first things first, you'll need a canvas head, weaving thread, and needles. I use curved needles, T-pins, but I'm using ballpoint pins, a dome cap, some scissors, and of course your bundles and a closure. Next, you're going to place the wig cap on the canvas head. Make sure it's fitted nice and snug, and use the T-pins to hold it in place. You can slightly pull on the back of the cap to stretch it out just a little bit. Full disclaimer, this is not a brand new closure or brand new bundles. This is hair that I've previously had installed and I now decided to make a wig out of it. Place and center the closure in the middle of the canvas head and slide a tiny bit of the lace forward. Now place the pins all the way around the closure to ensure there's no space or gaps. You want this to be extremely flat. I sprayed some water onto the closure to help with the detangling, then I put it in a bun to get it out of the way. I usually sew my closure first, but because this is a beginner-friendly tutorial, I'd like to show you how I sew the wefts or the bundles first, then I'll show you how I sew the closure because it can be a bit tricky. And your closure should look something like this. Now we're going to draw our guidelines for sewing the tracks, and I'm using my metallic Sharpie to do so. I'm also using the first crease on my index finger to help create my guide. You can use a measuring tape for this. And once I got to the top of the head, I started curving my lines like so. I'm going to be using 3 bundles of straight Brazilian hair in the lengths 26, 24, and 22 inches, and the closure is 20 inches. So you want to use your pins to help hold the weft or the tracks in place. To me, this makes the process easier. Also, I will not be doubling the tracks until I get to the top of the wig. I place the needle through the cap, then through the weft. I then pull the needle through, but before the thread ends, I split the end of the thread apart and place my needle between the thread. And this is just one way to create a knot. I'll be showing you a few different ways as we go on. I then repeat this process over and over. I recommend sewing the beginning and the ending of your tracks close together for security. So this is just the way I learned how to sew the tracks, or I was taught how to sew the tracks, but there are many ways to sew your tracks. I'm sure you'll find maybe an easier method or technique. This is just the one that works best for me. I'm sure you'll find what's easier for you as well. And we're going to speed this up a little bit until we get to flipping the tracks over. So once I get towards the end of the first row, I start sewing close together so there's no lumps or bumps. You want it to be as flat as possible. Now we're going to curve the track upwards so it stops at the beginning of the second row. And we're going to stretch the weft out and apply the pins to keep it in place. And we continue sewing. So we're about to fold the track again, and we're going to be doing the exact same thing like before. Curve the track, sew close together, and flip the track over. So this is another technique used to create a knot, and all you're doing is pushing the needle through the cap, then through the weft, but before pulling it through entirely, you're going to wrap the thread around the needle a few times, then you'll pull it through. I continue sewing the tracks, making sure they're neat and tight, and I only sew through the weft at the beginning and the end of the track just to secure it. You do not have to go through the weft each time. Up next, we're about to get started on the closure, and I'll be sewing the left side first, then the right side, and I'll be sewing the middle or the back of the closure last. So first I create a knot for security. I then push the needle through the edge of the closure and then the cap. And I'm sewing extremely close together because when the wig is complete, you'll need to cut the excess cap underneath the closure off. And you do not want any lumps or bumps. You want a seamless and flat closure. And when I get to the edges, I go over it a few times, making sure it's secured. Then I backtrack just a little bit for that added security. I do not want my wig to be unraveling. And now we're going to repeat the same steps on the other side. So when I got to the top of the wig, I realized that some of my guidelines were a little bit too far apart or just not close enough for my liking. So I added a few tracks to the spaces in order to get a fuller look. And I have already started doubling my tracks. So of course I ran out of hair, but I had a few pieces laying around, so I used that for my last two rows. Also, I always sew my last two tracks single to avoid getting that hump at the top of your head. I sew the last track as close to the closure as possible, but not on top of the closure. Now we're all finished. We're going to be removing the wig from the canvas head and cut the excess cap underneath the lace closure. So I was not very careful when cutting the excess cap off, and I accidentally cut the lace. But thank God it was closer to the cap and not in the middle of the closure. But I stitched it together and it was okay. So be extra careful when doing this and take your time. You don't want to end up like me. And now I'm going to flat iron the hair using a heat protector and my Remington flat iron. And now I'm going to go through the closure with my hot comb and wax stick to further flatten out the top. I part small sections at a time so I can get the roots of the closure to lay perfectly flat. So this video is already long, so I would not include the installation in this part, but I will be making a part 2 where I get the wig installed. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end of this video, I really appreciate that. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Bye.